Good afternoon. I'm actually making this video to address a conversation that's going on Facebook. So we're talking about right now the culpability of the U.S. government and its foreign policy when it comes to radicalizing, say, let's just say Arab people. Let's not just say Muslim people. So somebody has said that, we can't blame the U.S. as a whole. So if I say that you, as a citizen of the United States, are a victim because your government goes and makes war with other countries outside of the jurisdiction of the Constitution, I might add, and they make enemies abroad with their foreign policy that's unconstitutional, then I'm not saying that you as an American citizen are guilty of the things that the United States government does around the world in your name. You only become guilty when you blatantly refuse to acknowledge it when it's brought to your attention, and if you find yourself justifying some of these illegal actions. First of all, anything that, from a statist perspective, let me preface by saying that from a statist perspective, right? That's anything that the government goes and does without the authority of the Constitution is tyranny. The Constitution is put in place to keep the boots of government off of our neck. And the easiest way to bring tyranny to a country is to keep it in a perpetual state of war. So I'm not going to sit here and try to nail down any one reason for why the government is motivated to take the American people to war, but I will cite several different observances that I've made over time. So let's start with, where did our problems in the Middle East actually begin? Most Americans are going to say, the Middle East has had a problem with the United States since the taking of the hostages in 1979. If that is your stance and that's where you think this all began, false, you're wrong. It actually began in 1953. If you read a book, All the Shah's Men, basically it outlines how Mossadegh, who's democratically elected leader of Iran, kicked out British Petroleum and nationalized the oil fields. Now, Britain first came to Truman to try to get Truman involved, and he didn't want no part of it, especially after having dropped nukes over in Japan. So basically, when Eisenhower became president, he was able to be convinced that it was in America's interest to unseat Mossadegh. So that's what happened. The CIA dropped leaflets: up with Mossadegh, up with communism, down with Allah. So the CIA went and staged a coup in Iran. Mossadegh was out. The U.S. helped install the Shah. The Shah subsequently killed 100,000 Iranian people. So that was the beginning, really, of our problems in the Middle East. Now, that model, that CIA dabbling in other people's governments, first of all, it's unconstitutional. It's an act of war. The CIA has no authority. This is why John F. Kennedy said that he was going to scatter the CIA to the winds. So that's happened, I don't know, more than 70 times at least since the end of World War II. The CIA has gotten involved in one way or another in other governments. And that's really why the U.S. is making enemies abroad. Now let's dial it back to addressing ISIS and Al-Qaeda in particular. The gentleman in the comments is correct. It's basically documented in the Associated Press. Just do a search for yourself. We propped up the Mujahideen against Russia. Osama bin Laden was actually a CIA asset. So we trained the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen became Al-Qaeda. Sibel Edmonds, who was the most gagged woman in U.S. history, FBI Turkish translator, testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee stating that Al Qaeda was under U.S. control at least up to the morning of 9/11. Fast forward to some of your pet peeves. Let's talk about Benghazi. Benghazi was just an extension of Fast and Furious. The gun walking that we did first with Mexico, we were doing it over between Libya and Syria, from one portion of Al Qaeda to another. So that's what got our people killed in Benghazi. We keep getting into bed with the devil, and we end up having these consequences. Whether or not they're intended is irrelevant. That's what happens. And now you have the Pentagon leaking the fact that we've basically helped train ISIS and we've helped arm them. So, fool me once, shame on me, twice, shame on you, 3, 4, 5. How many times are we going to be fooled that our government does not act in the interest of the American people? Again, we can indict the government for their wrongdoings. Most smart Americans know that half of the government is full of shit. But the people who are awake, they know that it's all bullshit. And this is why people like myself get involved in activism, because we need your help. If you can question Hillary Clinton and what she did with emails, which is, by the way, just a fraction of what her and her husband have been accused of over the years. Google Clinton body count, see how many hundreds of people have ended up dead on the wrong side of Hillary and Bill Clinton. But that's another thing for another time. If you can indict her for her secrecy in passing state secrets, then you have to be able to look at both parties with the same type of critical analysis. Okay, you have to be able to recognize, Brian, that 6 out of 10 of the members of the 9/11 Commission testified saying that they were prevented from doing a full investigation. You have to acknowledge that more than 3,000 architects and engineers, people who are within the science of construction and structure in the U.S., have signed Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. They've signed the petition. These are legitimate questions that are out there, and when you basically mock somebody for pointing this out to you, that's not what it is you feel like your identity is being attacked because we're saying that the American government, your brand of the American government, your Republican brand of the American government is guilty for wrongdoing. And it's the same thing that happens when people criticize Obama. Their brand is being attacked, their identity is invested in it, and they cannot divorce themselves from that party. Let me damn the Republicans again. During the Republican National Convention, there was a vote. Aye, yay, yelled all the delegates. And what they were voting on were rules changes. And those rules were the same rules that actually brought Ronald Reagan into power, that actually put, I believe, Warren G. Harding became president from getting his speech. Basically, when a candidate comes to the convention with a certain amount of delegates, they get a chance to make their case for why they should be the party's nominee, and that's how Reagan got that speech in 1976, and he was the nominee and eventually the president in 1980. You can't get another Reagan, and you can't get another Ron Paul because they changed the rules and they didn't do it with a legitimate vote like they would have the Republican base believe, as people yelled aye and nay. And we watched it from the news. We heard John Boehner say, it is the opinion of the chair that the ayes have it, and the vote stands or falls, or whatever the case was. But the problem was somebody was standing behind John Boehner with a cell phone, like what I have right now in my hands, and they caught him reading his decision from a teleprompter. That's very damning. If you're a Republican, even if you were a Mitt Romney supporter, you have to be able to understand that you were just deceived by your party. And if we catch them there, and we catch them here, and we catch them there, then why can't people just look at the whole apparatus for what it is? It is just a big Coke versus Pepsi, brand recognition, non-issue, left-right, false paradigm to make you believe that you have a choice and you have a voice. And the problem with people who get wound up and say, well, if you don't like it, just leave. is because you don't have an argument, and you feel like your identity is being attacked, and you feel like you're being pinned with moral culpability. You're not morally responsible until you have somebody point it out to you, like I just have done. And if you refuse to do the research for yourself and vet the things that I've said, then you become responsible because you are blindly obedient, and that's called unchecked nationalism. It's not patriotism. And for an example of what unchecked nationalism can do, go Google any images of Nazi Germany and the people Sieg Heiling, and that led to 6 million Jews going to the oven. Have a nice day.